7th grade math, study guide 4, problem number 1. It says, in 8 minutes you can text 304 words. How many can you do in 12 minutes? So we got to find our unit rate, okay? So it's 304 words per 8 minutes. Remember, time, always put time second unless they tell you otherwise in the directions. So time is always on the bottom or second. So I divide in and out. I go 304 divided by 8. 8 goes into 30. Let's see here. 8 goes into 33 times. Subtract those two, drop that down. 8 goes into 64 8 times. So the number is 38. And what that means is, since this is words and this is minutes, it's 38 words per minute. So 38 words per minute, and they say how many for 12 minutes, we just multiply by 12. So then 8 times 2 is 16, carry my 1. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. We go over, so we skip a space. 38 times 1 is just 38. Add these up, and the answer is 456 words. Problem number 2. It says a car traveled at a constant speed for 156 miles on 4.8 gallons of gas. What is the unit rate? Okay, so we usually talk about miles per gallon in our society. So we put miles first, gallon second. So miles first, gallon second, and we divide in and out. And we're dividing here. We can't have a decimal in the divisor, so we have to clear this. We have to move this one time. Our decimal is here. If you don't see it, it's always on the right. So you got to move it one time. It's now here. Bring it right up top right away. Now 48 into 1,560. Well, I know 48 doesn't go into 1, it doesn't go into 15, but it does go into 156. So this is where my first number goes right here. If that's kind of hard for you, you just take one of those off and say 4 into 15. 4 into 15, that's about 3 times. So I go over here, I go 48 times 3. That's my starting point, right? I multiply those two. 8 times 3 is 24, carry my 2. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is 12 plus 2 is 14. Okay, so I put the 3 here, I multiply those, I get 144. I subtract those two, drop one digit down after we subtract. 48 goes into 120. Well, again, we can take that off. 4 goes into 12 like 3 times, but I know this is closer to 5, so it's actually going to be 2. If you didn't understand what I just said, we already did 48 times 3. I see that that's too big, so now I got to multiply by 2 to check that. So I go 16. So 48 times 2, there's a 2 there. That's 96. I subtract these two. I'm going to borrow. And then I drop a 0 down, because once I put a decimal, I can drop as many zeros as I need to. And 240 times 5, 48 times 5 is 240. 32.5 is their answer. What it means is 32.5 miles per gallon, MPG. MPG, miles per gallon. All right, number 3. There are 30 boys to 2 girls in a wrestling class. What's the boy to girl ratio? If they say boy to girl, you put boys first. If they say girl to boy, it would be this one, okay? But it's this one because they say boys to girls. Then you have to reduce that, right? You do your factor trees, cross out your ones. 15 to 1 ratio. And that's what's the difference between a fraction and a ratio. Fractions, you can simplify out the 1. Ratios, you don't. That's one of the difference, but otherwise they're mostly, really, ratios and fractions are mostly just the same. The table below is proportional. All ratios are equivalent. How many grams of peanuts are there for each gram of raisins? So since they said raisins second, raisins got to go on the bottom. So I'll take the first one. Since they're all proportional, they're all the same, I'll just take the first one. I put 4.4, and they say for each gram of raisins. Raisins goes on the bottom because of the way they said the problem. When I divide these two, I get 1.1. 1.1 grams of peanuts for each gram of raisins. Now, if they said raisins for each gram of peanuts, then I would split this, right? Number 5. There are 3 different companies. Company A, they charge $70 for 4 shirts. So the unit price is 70 divided by 4, right? In and out. Money on top, in and out. So 4 goes into 7 one time. I subtract those two. 4 goes into 30 7 times. Subtract. 4 goes into... Ooh, sorry, I'm running out of space here. Let me bring this up a little bit so you can see more. 4 goes into 25 times. And the unit price for Company A, they're charging $17.50 a shirt. How did I do that? I divided money by the number. Over Company B over here now, they say Company B charges $168 for 10 shirts. Well, if I'm dividing by 10, that's easy. I just move the decimal one time. So in other words, Company B is $16.80 a shirt. Okay, that's less than A, right? And now we have Company C. Company C, they say 5 shirts cost $90. Even though they put the 5 first, you got to put money first, money on top. So it's $90 for 5 shirts. So again, I go in and out, I divide 90 by 5, subtract, and I see that Company C is charging $18 a shirt. So B is charging the least amount per shirt, or the lowest unit price. Okay. Alright, next problem. Number 6, we have to prime factorize 490. 490, whenever you guys see a 0, you can simply do this. That's 49 times 10, right? Okay. Ooh, let's not use x's for times. Let's use a dot, because that's going to look like a variable now, right? So 49 times 10. And 49 is just 7 times 7 times 10 is 2 times 5. So we break it down to prime numbers, and we look at our answers here. It's got to be A, okay? Now, the thing, don't be tricked here, because some of them will equal, like this one right here. Some of them will also equal 490, but 10's not prime, so that's why you wouldn't choose the other ones that equal 490. Number 7. So they all have to be prime numbers. We're going to simplify 60 over 210. When you have zeros, you can cross each one out. That's like dividing both a 10 out of both, right? So I got 60 over 21. 60 over 21, 6 over 21. 6 is 3 times 2. 21 is 3 times 7, right? Prime factorize, cross out my 1's, and my answer has to be reduced already. Number 8, we have 2 divided by 14 thirds. Since this line's a little bit bigger, that's where the division symbol goes. Whoops, there we go. Divided by 14 thirds. So I go 2 over 1 times the reciprocal of 14 thirds, flip it upside down. Now I'm going to do my factor trees. 14 is 2 times 7. I prime factorize, cross out my 1's. What's left has to be a reduced fraction. That's my answer. Number 9. We're going to simplify 6 sevenths divided by 2. 6 sevenths divided by 2 means 6 sevenths divided by 2 over 1. I'm going to make that into a multiplication problem by multiplying by the reciprocal of this second one over here. Then I do my factor trees, and I cross out my 1's. And that means my answer will be reduced already, 3 sevenths. Problem number 10. Larry can swim 2/3 miles. 2/3 miles in, that means over, or slash, 1/4 hour. What's his unit rate? Okay, so remember, time on the bottom. So I go 2/3. This means division. All fractions are division problems. 2/3 times 4 over 1. We multiply by reciprocal. Now, 3 is prime. If 3 is prime and doesn't go into any of these, I can just multiply 8/3. So it's 8/3. However, if you look in the answer key, it doesn't give us an improper fraction. So this is one of those cases where you have to convert it. This is already reduced. We're done. But I'm going to convert it just because that's what they wanted this time. So I go in and out. 3 times 2 is 6. You take your remainder. And we get 2 2/3, but it's miles per hour. Miles per hour. Okay. Next problem. So check our answer. Number 10. Yep, 2 2/3 mile per hour. Number 11. See if that helps a little bit. Alright, so number 11, we have a turtle walked 4.5 miles in, that means over or slash, 2 hours. What was his speed? In other words, find unit rate again. So I'm going to make everything into a fraction, right? I multiply. 4 times 2 is 8, and then I add. 8 plus 1 is 9, and I keep the same bottom number. Divided by, make that into a fraction by putting it over 1. Now, what do I do there? I multiply by reciprocal. Okay? These are prime. I know 2 doesn't go into 3, so I don't need to break that down. I got 9/4. But again, this is one of those problems where I wanted you to convert since it's a word problem. So I go in and out. 9 divided by 4. 9 times 2 is 8. Take my remainder, put it at top, take your divisor, put it on the bottom. 2 1/4 is our answer, but it's 2 1/4 miles per hour. So it's 2 1/4 miles per hour, and that's just one way to write miles per hour, right? Number 12. A water pump moves water at the same rate, which means that all of these rates are the same. Okay, so why don't you just pick the easiest one down here? Okay, find the unit rate. So I'll take, remember, time is always on the bottom unless they specifically tell you otherwise, right? If they say gallons per minute, minutes on the bottom. Whoops, gallons per minute, minutes on the bottom. Now, if they decide to get tricky and say minutes per gallon, which doesn't make sense, but you can get a rate from that, then you would do the otherwise. But if they don't tell you otherwise, remember, time's always on the bottom. So I go gallons on top, time on bottom. 1 divided by 1/3 means 1 times 3 over 1, which is just 3 gallons per minute. Number 13. Deanne paid $18 for 3 yards. Well, that's division, right? 18 divided by 3 means she paid $6 a yard. $6 a yard. Okay, that's a slash, not a 61. Okay. Then we have Jess. Jess paid she purchased $4 and 4 2/3 yards for $14. But remember, money on top, so we got to switch this if we're going to get the unit price or unit rate. Money on top, right? Unless they tell us otherwise, unless it's one of those tricky problems. Money's always on top. So I got to switch these two and put the money first. I make everything a fraction, right, when I'm dealing with fractions. So 3 times 4 is 12. 12 plus 2 is 14. 14 divided by 14/3 will tell me how much Jesse paid per yard. That's 14, but I got to make it multiplication. Before I do my factor trees, I see I have the same thing, so I'll just hit it right away. That means Jesse paid $3 per yard. And now we have to check to see how much Deborah paid. So Deborah, good old Deborah, she bought 1 2/3 yards for $5. But again, money on top. We got to switch these two. We don't just do it in the order the problem gave it to us. We have to make sense of the problem and say money on top, right? It's how much per yard. So I go 5 divided by, make that into a fraction, make this into a fraction, multiply by reciprocal like we've been doing, cross cancel, and I get Deborah's paying $3 per yard too. Question is, which of these ladies paid the same? Well, it was Deborah and it was Jessie. You guys got to be careful though, because it might not be any. It could be all three, so always test all three. So let's say I tested Deborah and Jessie first. I wouldn't stop. I wouldn't assume that Deanne's going to be different. I check all three because that's going to be one of your answer choices, right? Don't let me fool you there. Okay. So next one, number 14. I think we're on. Number 14 says, select the statement that is most true. Okay, so we don't know if this is proportional or not, so we have to test all of these. Okay. Now you can put top monkeys over people or people over monkeys. Since later in 8th grade math and algebra 1, this is going to be x and this is going to be y. You're always going to put the bottom on top and then that. So in other words, just to prepare for that, we're going to put people to monkeys ratio. Okay, bottom to top, just to train ourselves to think that way. We only change it when the problem asks us to change it. Like if they said monkey to people, then we change it. So for 14, we're going to put people on top and monkeys on the bottom. So we get used to all slope and all that later on, do it in the right order. So I put the bottom number on top for my ratio of people to monkeys. In my top number goes second. And then I divide these two, right? I go in and out. It's okay if I have a decimal here, I put it up top. I just can't have a decimal out here. That's when I have to clear it. So 5 doesn't go into 2, but it does go into 25. So there's a 0.5 ratio of people to monkeys in the first box right here. That's the ratio. We got to test all the boxes now. Second box, I have 0.5 to 1 or 0.5 divided by 1. Well, it's easy to divide by 1. That's just, my number inside there, my dividend. So I got the same ratio. And when I got 0 to 0, that means this might be proportional. That's good. If it was 0 to anything else, I automatically know it's not proportional, right? But I don't have to divide the zeros. Next, I have on the bottom 3.5 people per 7 monkeys. So I go 3.5 divided by 7. Again, I get 0.5. It's looking good, but I don't assume anything. I always test all three. So the next one, I have 20 monkeys to 10 people. which some of you might think is 0.5, but when you divide, you can see it's actually not. It's 2. That one's different. So this is not proportional. If it were proportional, they would have all been the same except for 0, 0. So don't even choose the answer to say that is proportional. Go down to the ones that are not proportional. But you have to read the reasons. C says this is not proportional because none of the ratios are the same. That's not true. 3 of the ratios were the same, so don't pick that answer. D says this is not proportional because aside from 0, 0, there was 1 that was different, and that's true. So that's why for number 14, the answer is D. Number 15. Which quadrant is 9, negative 9 in? Well, 9, negative 9 goes positive. We go side to side first, right? And then negative. Then we go up and down. So it's down here. If it goes quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4, that's quadrant 4. Number 16. 16 says, which graph is proportional? If you're looking at the graphs here, this is the only one that's straight and goes to the origin. So that has to be C. I hope that's an easy problem for you on the test. Number 17. Number 17, we're going to solve this equation, this proportion. Remember, we learned about cross products in class. We learned why that works for proportions. So first thing we do, we're going to separate our left from our right side, right? Keep our equal sign in there, and then we cross multiply. Draw that butterfly, right? X times 8 is 8x. Put the number first and then the letter. Over here, 15 times 7. And notice that I put the equal sign in the middle. 15 times 7, I go off to the side and I get 105. So I got 8x equals 105. Now, in order to figure out what x is, because that's what solving means, right? Figuring out what x is, I divide both sides by 8. Now, when I do my factor trees and cross out my 1s, I see that 105 over 8 is reduced, so there's my answer. We got 18. Number 18 says, which proportion could be used? Okay, they say there's 29 people. Walk through the gate in 45 seconds. Remember, time on the bottom, right? Now, you don't have to do that as proportional, but, well, too much information. Let's just keep going. Okay, 96 seconds. So 96 seconds on the bottom, so I put seconds on the bottom. How many people? X people. Keep your people with your people, your seconds with your seconds. So, this is one that could work. They use P instead of X. Answer is D. But let's look and see why A doesn't work. A says this. 29 to 45 equals 96 over P. Now this is people over seconds, and this is seconds over people. That's why it doesn't work, right? People over seconds is seconds over people. That's why this one doesn't work. B has P over 96 equals 45 over 29. This is people over seconds. This is seconds over people. They didn't keep the same thing. And C is 29 to 45 equals P over 141. Now, this is 29 people in 45 seconds. This is how many people in 141 seconds. Now, the thing is, they added these two. I added these two right here, which we have to do sometimes, but not this time, because the problem didn't use the word total. When you see the word total, you know you have to add something. So that's why C doesn't work, and the answer is D. Now, be advised, though, this could be written this way, right? I could switch these two and put 45 or seconds on top and people on the bottom, as long as I do seconds on top and people on the bottom over here. Okay? I could also switch the order, so I can put people on top, seconds here, as long as I put people on top, seconds here as well. Okay? All right. So, number 19. The ratio of girls to boys at a Taylor Swift concert is 5 to 3. This is girls. This is boys. Okay. So let's see. It looks like she has a couple blank spaces there. Maybe she'll write your name. So Taylor Swift has a 5 to 3 ratio of girls to boys. How many boys are there if there's a total of 25,000 people in the concert? They used that word, didn't they? They used total. So we're going to have to add something. First of all, they're asking how many boys if the total is. They're using boys and they're using total in the problem. So we got to take this ratio and convert it to be boys, because there are 3 boys for 5 girls, to total. The total is 3 plus 5, or 3 out of 8. Right? There's a 5 to 3, but 3 of the boys out of total 8. So we have to make sure we use the right ratio. So I got a 3 to 8 ratio. And then they say how many boys. Boys are on top here, so put total on the bottom. If there are 25,000 people total at the concert. So again, this is where we cross multiply. I have, think of quarters, right? 3 times 25. I have 75 with 3 zeros. And 8 times x is 8x. Divide both sides by 8. And x is, and when you divide those two, you're going to get 9,375. Last problem. Says a car used 12 gallons of gas for 180 miles. Okay, so we talk about miles per gallon in our society, right? So let's put miles on top so it makes sense to us. 180 miles per means over 12 gallons. How many total gallons? I use the word total. We're going to have to add something again. For 200 more miles, 200 additional. Total gallons for 200 more miles. So what we do then is, if it's 180 per 12 gallons, it's gallons on bottom, right? How many gallons? So down there is where we got to put our letter. Gallons, gallons, miles, miles. But here's the trick. Here's the total trick here. It's 200 more, so 200 doesn't go here. It's 200 more. That means the 180 already, that's what that total means. Add these two, I get 380. So there's the trick there, okay? We had to add them. What was the hint? The word total. Now I cross multiply. I get 180x equals 12 times 380. So we multiply that, 12 times 380. And we get, that's a 0. 180x equals 4,560 divided by 180. So remember, how do we solve proportions? Cross multiply and divide. Cross multiply and divide. You gotta memorize those 2 steps, alright? Cancel that out. Cross out my zeros. I got 456 divided by 18. 18 goes into 45 about 2 times. Subtract these. 18 goes into 96, I think about 5 times. Let me check that. 18 times 5. I think so. Looks pretty good. Put a decimal. So 18 times 5, it looks like that was 90. Subtract. Drop down to 0. 18 goes into 60 about, well, 18 times 5 is 90, so it's going to be smaller than 5, right? 18 times 2 is that, so maybe try like 18 times 4 maybe? Or 3 probably is going to work. 24, yep. So the problem says round to the nearest whole number. In other words, it says how many total gallons, round to the nearest gallon. If it's 25.3, when we round, either it's going to stay 25 or it's going to go up to 26. 25.3 isn't quite halfway to 26, so since this is not 5 or bigger, it stays, so it's about 25. So about 25 gallons total. And that's it.